Welcome to The Factor. Nigeria has had the worst possible start to 2018. We're not even halfway into the first month, and already there have been almost 200 reported deaths from Rivers to Kaduna to Taraba to Benue. The most troubling of all is the gruesome killings by Fulani Herdsmen. When this heavily armed group descends on the community, nothing and no one is spared in their wake. When they attacked Agatu local government area of Benue State in February 2016, they killed more than 500 human beings. CSOs and journalists who visited the area afterwards said for miles and miles, there were no humans to be seen. The only things that roamed freely were cattle. Governor of Benue State Samuel Otom said, "The herdsmen spare no one. My own house was burnt. Kids haven't been to school in 2 years. They even slice the bellies of pregnant women." This is a very, very serious threat to Nigeria's peace. Yet sadly, there has been a disturbing inaction in Azuakola. After the latest attack this month, the presidency released a statement expressing shock and promising to investigate and convene a conference to chart solutions. Anyone who believes that soulless statement from the presidency must suffer from a terrible memory loss. That because it's exactly the same thing that is said after every massacre by the herdsmen. It's never followed up with action. The presidency always says it wants to look into the root cause of the killings as though it can ever find a justification for such barbarity. The presidency never calls out the herdsmen. It manufactures excuses for them at the villa, even in cases where the herdsmen confess to their own atrocities in the media. The presidency never proscribes them, not even the increasingly emboldened Mietiala Cattle Breeders Association have been banned. There has been no Operation Python dance called in the area, yet the violence of this group is worse than anything IPOB ever managed at the peak of Nnamdi Kanu's prowess. When candidate Buhari was campaigning in 2015, he said the solution to the herdsmen-farmers clashes was political leadership that will engender trust among the people. But as president, Buhari has shown no leadership on the matter, and his body language has signaled bias. So where does that leave us? If the people of the Middle Belt wait for Buhari to take action on this issue, all that will be left of them by the time he's ready to act would be the stench of their slaughtered corpses and the smoke fuming from their burnt down homes. They must never allow such a fate to befall them. It's time for them to stand their ground. After all, the backers of the herdsmen contribute offerings and sell cows to fund the attacks, so the people of the Middle Belt must now do the same. They must contribute to arm themselves in defense. This memo is not calling for an attack on the herdsmen. No, they are Nigerians like every one of us. But the people of the Middle Belt must be ready to stand their ground and defend their children, defend their wives, and defend their homeland. Even countries with serious governments and professional security agents have stand your ground laws. In the United States, for instance, there are 24 states where it is legal to use deadly force if a person believes that another person intends to murder or use unlawful force on him or her. I know the Nigerian law does not give those stand your ground rights presently, but for all those who will scream rule of law to me, my response is this: justice is greater than the rule of law. Besides, only the living can observe the law. A cow's life is not more important than that of a man. A cow's life is not more important than that of a man. We can sing this song a million times, and every single time we sing it, it will still be the fact. A cow's life is not more important than that of a man. That is exactly why the people of the Middle Belt must stand their ground now. And that's my memo. On the Factor Deep Dive, I spoke with a lady who has without a doubt been one of Nigeria's most important diplomats, scholar, and thinker of the last 40 years. Ambassador Joy Ogwu was Nigeria's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Permanent Representative to the United Nations, and she served on 2 different occasions as the President of the United Nations Security Council. Her time at the UN spanned 4 different administrations in Nigeria. Professor Ogwu just released 3 books: The Anatomy of Consensus, Building Bridges, and Leadership, Democracy, and the Challenges of Development. I spoke with her about the truly depressing moment in her time at the United Nations. She was the President of the UN Security Council when 276 girls were kidnapped in Chibok, Borno State, under the Goodluck Jonathan administration. That same month, there was a terrible Boko Haram bomb blast in Yanya, Abuja, that resulted in almost 100 deaths. I asked her to walk me through how it felt being the most visible Nigerian in the UN at that time.
You're very, very perceptive, and that's the most painful period of my duty tour in New York. And in fact, that will be the sequel to this book, to the UN book, Critical Issues on the UN Security Council. And I will address Chibok because there I was sitting as President of the Security Council, and there was Chibok. Can you imagine the pain? You couldn't sit on it. They wanted it tabled. And there was the bombing in 2010 of the United Nations. Oh yes, it's painful, very painful. But you know, just cope with it. I must defend my country, preserve the integrity of my country. But I tell you, it was very, very painful. But we managed it. We managed it. We didn't lose anything. But, you know, mobilizing the necessary strength and wisdom to deal with it was very difficult.
Professor Ogwu is a fierce defender of Nigeria's independence, and in my interview with her, she got really animated when I asked what she thought about President Trump's threat to cut off aid to countries like Nigeria that voted against America in last month's UN resolution on Jerusalem. No one can threaten Nigeria, she said. On the substance of the matter, however, she took a slightly different position from the federal government. Recall that Nigeria voted with 127 other countries which opposed the United States' Jerusalem decision. But in Professor Ogwu's opinion, the US decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem wasn't such a big deal, and that's how she would have viewed the vote if she was there.
No, we don't succumb to threats in Nigeria, and personally, I don't succumb to threats. In fact, there was an occasion when an ambassador came to report that his citizens have been kidnapped and threatened with a vote. He threatened with a vote because we are going to the Human Rights Council. I said, I don't take threats very kindly. Let's discuss the matter. Nobody would have threatened Nigeria. Nigeria would have voted in the national interest. This issue comes up from time to time in various dimensions, in various forms. It depends on the circumstances at the time. But I know that in the General Assembly, we've done a study of Nigeria's voting pattern on issues concerning Palestine and Israel. Any president of Nigeria can decide to consider a paradigm shift from what is the norm. It is his entitlement as the principal foreign policy actor. You go with it or you leave. You resign according to your conscience. So there is no hard and fast rule about this. The president of a country is the principal foreign policy actor, and he essentially decides to shift, decide a policy shift. And it happens to every other country. So Nigeria's is no exception.
So, but would you have voted for this?
Depends on the circumstances of the state at the time.
Considering what we know now,
What do we know now?
the fact that America has moved its embassy, Nigeria has always been in support of a two-state solution, and America has decided to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Knowing what you know right now, if you were there, would you have voted as Nigeria voted?
Well, I would consider the decision to move to Jerusalem as not as important as the conflict itself. I mean, it's not important. You want to find out what will be the dynamics of a two-state solution. What has Jerusalem got to do with it? So that is supposedly in the national interest of the United States, may not be in the national interest of Nigeria. So every country decides what is best in its national interest. I cannot speak for the United States. I couldn't even speak for my president because he is the foreign policy actor, the principal foreign policy actor, and he would advise the permanent representative to go along with his perception on the issue. So to tell you, I don't know what I would have done, but if I were on the spot, I would have weighed the options and then consulted my government. Because I mean, in most cases, when ambassadors meet, they must consult with their governments. That could even delay action on a draft resolution. But in consultation with their governments, they take what is in their best.
At the beginning of this show, I argued that the people of the Middle Belt must stand their ground and protect themselves against attacks by the murderous herdsmen. The federal government has shown that it is either unwilling or unable to defend hapless citizens from those attacks. Professor Ogwu disagrees with me. She said it is self-destructive and must never be suggested. I respect the views of the learned professor, but on this matter I think she's wrong. Take a listen to some of our other thoughts on the herdsmen-farmers conflict.
Well, we're talking about two things now. Maybe one has a political dimension, the other one is security issue. Where you have a proliferation of arms, people would want to stir conflict so they can use their equipment or instruments. First is to make sure that every society is starved of illicit arms, small arms and light weapons. Our society is not starved of those. Data shows that there are 10 million small arms and light weapons in West Africa, and 7 of them belong here. That's a serious security concern. And we owe it as an obligation to our society to make sure that we don't stay engaged with those, because one thing leads to the other. There's a cause and effect relationship. Proliferate arms, and then you have potential for conflict. So we have to get rid of small arms and light weapons, illicit small arms and light weapons, because people feel they have a ready weapon for use. The others are for the policymakers to address. Ours is to provide the diagnosis and the prognosis based on data. But what I wanted is essentially from the anatomy of a consensus is to demonstrate to the world that it really works to act in concert on certain issues, and that it is possible to reach a consensus on such a divisive issue. But we did, and that was victory.
Okay, that was Professor Ogwu, truly impressive lady. I thank her very immensely for her service to this country. But that's how much time we have on this episode of The Factor. See you next week. Bye-bye.